Lannette West is a bold, beautiful force, best known for captivating audiences on HBO Max and TLC's MILF Manor, where she emerged in a second series as not only the quintessential sexy American mom next door, but as a woman with depth, strength, and story. A proud single mom from North Carolina, Lannette has seen she used a platform to share the highs and lows of her life with honesty, heart, and humor. For personal struggles, including overcoming addiction, to public victories, she now dedicates her voice to those who feel unseen, reminding us all that intimacy, connection, and courage go hand in hand. Her journey is a testament to the power of visibility, vulnerability, and living out loud. And I am thrilled that you agreed to join us today. It's super kind of you. I've already met your beautiful dog. You've met mine, so I feel like we've got something in common. I wanted to sort of start, if it's okay, by taking you back just a little bit. So
Sure.
if we could sort of sit beside the younger version of you, maybe from your formative years, your early teens, what would we see? And can you sort of see a connection between the person you were then and the person you are now?
Yeah, there are some similarities, and then in a lot of ways, I resemble that girl not at all. She definitely is very similar to me in a lot of ways, in that there was a front that was put up of confidence and intelligence and capabilities, but behind the curtains, riddled with insecurities and a lack of self-esteem. And it's very similar to how I am now. I feel like a lot of the times I put up this very formidable front, but really behind it is still that little girl who feels unseen and unheard. And, the whole sense of self-worth is something I've struggled with my entire life. So I've worked on that a lot. I'm now at the point where I can look in the mirror and go, oh, okay, this is okay. Like, I like this person. Like, this is all right. Whereas before, I would look in the mirror and I couldn't. It was very difficult to make eye contact with myself. So she was sort of a shell of a person, because she didn't really understand what all she had been through yet. So now that I have some of that understanding as an adult, that lends itself to a lot of empathy and compassion. And when you have that understanding for yourself and that compassion for yourself, I think it unlocks the next level of love for yourself, which I think is really the ultimate journey that we're on.
Absolutely. Sometimes you sort of see the word, sometimes people see and hear the phrase self-love and they sort of think self-indulgence. But I think self-love, you sort of think without having that and accepting who we are, it's very hard to really connect with others, whether that be in a intimate relationship, in a physical way, whether that be in a friendship way. If we don't truly know what makes us who we are and what we enjoy, what we desire, what we don't enjoy, yeah, it's just hard to share that with somebody else, isn't it?
I agree. And getting to know yourself and understand yourself is one thing, but then accepting yourself, even for all the ugly parts, that was where I really struggled, because there were so many parts of myself I did not like, I did not want to be like. And being more empathetic now and more understanding of myself, I'm so much more accepting of that ugly stuff and realizing it's not really that ugly. It was just my perception of it that was so ugly. And learning to love those parts of you. And by loving them, it's not saying, oh, it's okay. Those parts of you just become acceptable in the context of, this is who I am. And I'm evolving and I'm continuing to better myself, and identifying those parts that need some of that extra attention. That's the way I like to reframe that in my head now. When I start, beating myself up about something, I try to find the silver lining in it and reframe it in a positive way. Because, beating yourself up and being negative, it accomplishes absolutely nothing. And it just leads to more negativity and dysfunction. So I really try to catch myself when I'm having those thoughts or I'm saying those words that are not helpful, that are not positive, that are not encouraging. Because really your perception is what defines your reality. And you have control over your perception because you have control over your thoughts. So that was a big realization for me. Really just in the past few years, I had a doctor that said, Lannette, your thoughts are not your beliefs. And I was like, huh? Because I just assumed if I thought something, that's what I believed. And if I had a thought, I always thought it was actionable. Like if I thought I should do something, I did it. I didn't stop and contemplate, does this make sense? Is this appropriate? Is this the right time? I never went through any of that internal dialogue. I just had the impulse to do it, so I did it. In a lot of ways, that served me well throughout my life. But as you can imagine, certainly in romantic relationships, that did not serve me very well. So coming to that realization that I could have a thought and go, no, I don't really think that jives. Like that doesn't work for me. I'm not going to have that thought, and reframe it and have a new thought and go with that. That was for me a paradigm shift in who I was and how I thought about myself.
And when do you remember first feeling comfortable and confident in your body and your sexuality and your desires? Do you think that's a recent thing, or is that something that you had from a younger age? When did you feel that came about?
Probably just within the past couple of years, and getting a handle on my sobriety. That was really the first time that I felt I was sort of leaning into who I am and who I want to be. I was never comfortable with my sexuality growing up because I grew up without a father, and he left when I was very young. And so when I started getting the attention from the boys, it was very satisfying, but I didn't understand why it was so appealing. And I knew that they responded to how I looked and how I would behave, and give in to whatever it is they wanted me to do. So I learned, I can get the attention that I'm seeking from men by being provocative, by being available to them. And that was really intoxicating because I'd never had that male attention. And I didn't even know it was something I was missing, because when you grow up without something, it's a non-issue. Like you don't know what you don't know. And it was really well into my adulthood. It was about 5 or 6 years ago now. I was having, one failed relationship after another. And I could see that I was craving this male attention and validation. And it was really affecting my behavior in a way that was very negative. And so I decided, this is something I need to work on, but how do I work on it? And I thought, let's go to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is my lack of relationship with my father. And he is still living. And so I reached out to one of my brothers and got his phone number, and I called him up. And I said, hey, this is your daughter. I'm going through some stuff. This is what I need from you. I need to have a relationship with you. I need to hear that you love me, that you're proud of me, and that you're interested in what I'm doing and spending time with me. Can you do that? And he was like, absolutely. And I was like, all right, deal. Let's do it. And he and I have had a very wonderful relationship ever since.
How did it feel when you picked up the phone to make that call?
I was very scary. I mean, I was scared. I was nervous. I wasn't sure how he was going to react, because over all these years, he reached out to me. It was really more his wife at the time, when I was in college. So I met him when I was a freshman at Carolina. He came and had lunch with me, and there wasn't any real connection. It was just like this guy, and he's very country, because I'm from the country. So he talked very Southern and wasn't particularly sophisticated. And I really wasn't in a place where I was that impressed, right? And he wasn't helping me financially, obviously. And I was struggling in college. So it wasn't the right time. And we fell out of touch again. I think we may have talked on the phone once or twice after that visit. And then I just wasn't interested. My mother and him had a very tumultuous, violent relationship. And so when it ended, I didn't hear the best things about my father. So I, had some preconceived notions to overcome in that department. And so as I got older and I started, forgiving myself for some things, I decided, you know what? I don't want to be judged by my worst moments, so I'm not going to judge him by his. We are so much more than the mistakes that we've made or the errors in judgment we've exercised. So that kind of opened me up to seeing him in a different light. And then when I had the chance to get to know him, he's older. He was in his late 70s at the time. He was much more chill. And he's actually a very nice, compassionate, understanding person. But that wasn't a side to him that I ever had the privilege of knowing. So in that respect, I'm grateful for the time that we have. He's now 82. He's had 8 stents put in his heart. He's had several heart attacks.
Goodness.
Yeah, he's a walking stent. He just had his last heart attack this past weekend and had another stent placed. So I feel like we're kind of living on borrowed time.
Yeah.
And I try to, we spent some time with him this weekend at his home outside Charlotte. And I value that time. And not only because I get to know him better, but it's allowing me to get to know myself better.
It's an incredibly powerful thing when you said it's not right to judge somebody on their worst moments. I never really thought of that, but that's often what we do, is that we sort of ignore what potentially is a volume of goodness, and we sort of hone in on these very, very negative things. So I think that's really insightful. Yeah, I'm definitely going to share that with a lot of people. So from what I've gauged so far, and from when we talked just before we hit record, and this isn't meant to be an insult at all, but you don't come across as the natural person that I would think, right, yeah, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on MILF Manor. Yeah, they had a series of that. I know that. I'm going to go on a second series. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm not going to ask why you went on. She talked about it before, but I just wondered, after you went on the show, you were suddenly in the public gaze. What was the biggest internal shift that you think you experienced that perhaps wasn't captured on camera? And then secondly, and I guess the answer has to be yes, but so maybe the question is why. So being so publicly visible and being in the newspapers, never mind the TV, the newspapers, the gossip columns, the social media, everywhere, did that change how you see yourself?
Well, it was eye-opening to see how other people perceived me, for sure. Because, we're all human. We all want to be well received. We don't want to be seen as dumb or ugly or hateful. At least I don't want to be, because I don't think that's who I am. But do I have components of those things to my personality? Absolutely. Can I be petty? Can I be jealous? Can I be insecure? For sure. I'm all of those things wrapped up in one. So the editing folks were very kind to me on the show, because there were some times I said some really bitchy things, and one bitchy, like I commented on one girl's teeth, which was really just a projection of my own insecurities about my own teeth, because I was going through a massive, expensive, drawn out ordeal. I had major tooth issues. And so I was, obviously inspecting everyone's teeth because it was such a topic on my mind. And I made a very negative comment about her teeth. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got fucked up teeth. Well, so do you, girl. Like, who are you to be talking? But there were, times that I was petty and I didn't say the most flattering things about myself or other people. And they did not necessarily show those things. So there was a little relief there. I was obviously very concerned about, because I knew I had the emotional breakdown. I couldn't really remember everything that I had said. And I knew that was going to make because it was dramatic, right? It was drama. There was crying involved.
Yeah.
And so I was very nervous about that. But what I saw, what they conveyed and what they captured, I was a little more compassionate to myself than I would have been years ago. So what I saw was just a very hurt, very damaged individual who did not see her light anymore. And that made me sad. And I do have those moments where I lose sight of all the positive things. And I think we all do that. I mean, we all go through phase. Not every day is going to be a home run day. There's some days where the goal is just to get through it. And that's okay too. But I think what resonated with people the most was just that I was just so raw about how horribly I felt about myself. because ever since, I was a child, I've always felt unlovable. And that's sad. That makes me sad. And I still struggle with that, and gaining the understanding that I now have is I know why now I've always felt that way. That was because of childhood trauma and, your father leaving you and your mother being narcissistic and unavailable. And so watching that was really hard because it was just putting it all out there. And I kind of had to take the attitude of, for those that it would resonate with, they would have compassion, and those who didn't get it wouldn't get it and would criticize. And those aren't my people anyway, so I don't give a shit what they think. And I was delighted. Well, not really delighted. It was very heartwarming, the messages that I received on social media after that episode aired, where I had, basically fallen apart and just said, no one's ever going to love me. And women were like, oh my gosh, I felt the same way, or my sister has felt the same way, or my mother is just like you, and I guess, we find comfort when others suffer the same way. What misery loves company.
Yeah.
But it was really endearing that people took the time to reach out to me and to encourage me and to validate me and say, hey, other people are going through this too. Because I felt very alone in that moment. I felt like I was the only one on the planet that felt that way. So knowing that I wasn't alone was a comfort to me. And then I thought, more people need to know this, because people suffer in silence and people suffer alone. And that makes me very sad, because that's how I've lived most of my life. And so that's kind of what gave rise to this effort to get into front of people like yourself who are willing to talk to me and willing to give me a platform where I can talk about some of these stigmatized things that are uncomfortable, that are ugly, that are not talked about, because we need to normalize not the behavior of these things, but the conversations and the healing from them. So I felt very seen and heard in that moment. And my hope is that other people can too, because I know what a difference that makes. Even after I have the opportunity to speak with someone like yourself, I've done this a few times now. And literally, as I wrap up and get up and walk away, there's a lightness to my step. It literally feels like I have unloaded a burden from myself. It is invariably very cathartic and therapeutic. And I don't think people really understand how much it helps just to speak about it, just to relieve it, to unpack it. Because I liken it to having like boxes in my brain that I've just stuffed with shit over the years and taped up and thrown back there. And then I wonder why I'm so fucking tired at the end of the day. Well, you're lugging around this house full of boxes that you don't need to be carrying, but you are, because you don't know how to unpack them. And then once you start figuring out, well, the way I unpack them is by acknowledging them, is by talking about them, is to try to gain some understanding and compassion about them. That releases it. It releases it out into the environment, into the atmosphere, and then you're not burdened with it any longer. And it changes the way you walk. It changes the way you talk. It changes the way you feel. And that was something I hadn't really expected when I started this. I mean, I'd hoped for the best, but that was an unexpected outcome for sure. And I want people to know that it does help. I mean, the whole stigma around therapy and, oh, you must be crazy, you're in therapy. Well, we all have things to unpack. We've all had trauma to some extent. We've all had issues that confused us or made us feel less about ourselves. And these are things we need to talk about. These are not things we need to bury and act like they don't exist, because they do exist and they will manifest themselves in different aspects of your life. And so that was something that was, really, I didn't see that coming. I was more terrified about how people were going to perceive me as like this crazy woman that had a breakdown on this reality show. And then that completely transitioned into improving and benefiting me in so many different ways in my life. So I'm grateful for that. But that was certainly something that was not intentional and not something I anticipated at all.
Thank you for saying those things. I a lot of what you said resonates. So I think, and I can't talk for anybody else, but I think what people felt when they saw you was genuineness. And I think there were other people on the show that obviously had a very carefully scripted game plan, and they're gonna, hook up with whoever came in and push this woman to one side and try and dive in there. And I think people, we've all seen that forever and a day in these sort of shows. But when somebody comes in and is genuine, you do feel for them. And I think I've had depression for a long time. And one of the things that really doesn't help is when people say, well, what have you guys been depressed about? You're fine. You've got a job, you've got a lovely house, you've got cars, and you've got family, and you're loved. And what are you got? And it's a little bit like they look at you and think, well, but you're beautiful, and you're sexy, and you're hot, and you've got beautiful kids, and you've got all these things. Why don't you live yourself? And that's the challenge, I think, is it almost stops us then saying it. I think if I say it, people are going to think I'm just looking for attention, or I'm just sort of want somebody to talk to. But I think as we go through the generations, I think it'll just become very, very natural to have a therapist, guide, coach, somatic healer, whatever. And I think if you talk to somebody about their phone, they say, right, so you're willing to spend £1,000 a year buying a new $1,000 a year to buy a new phone. Right. Well, let's spend $100 a month on your mental health and well-being. Oh, I'm not spending that. That is the definition of insanity. We've got this phone. The last one worked perfectly well, but we have to get the latest iPhone 15, 16, 20, whatever it is. But the thought of spending $100 a month on some sort of physical, emotional, mental therapy, we don't put the two together. But I do think that will change. And I think we'll recognize that a bit like whether it be our car or our house or our physical well-being, we're not expert, we're not doctors, we're not mechanics, we're not engineers, we're not housekeepers. So we hire somebody to do it for us. Exactly. I hire somebody to clean the house. And if I spend that money on therapy, I'm not spending $50 a week on therapy. But you spend it on a cleaner. It's just this really odd thing, and I guess that's society has sort of stigmatized a little bit the thought that we might need some sort of help. But I do think mental well-being is being talked about more now, whether that's in the entertainment industry, in the sports industry, in college. We're more aware of those things. So when you came out of the manor and you were sort of living okay, here I am, what did that change what intimacy means to you? So what does intimacy mean and look like for you today?
Yeah, I think one of the most important components of intimacy, or at least something I've always kind of struggled with, is that vulnerability, which really makes it ironic that I would go on national TV and just put everything out there, because I'm not in my day-to-day life normally that vulnerable. I'm normally stuffing it in the boxes and putting it in the back of my brain and carrying on, like you say, enjoying your nice job, your lovely home, your pretty car, your great kids, your great life. So that was really, that was really unplanned and unexpected. But the whole idea of being vulnerable and allowing yourself to be open and real, I mean, only then I think are you able to make those connections that are necessary for real intimacy. And I think for many years, I blocked that myself. I wasn't vulnerable. I just put up a front and kind of gave people what I thought they wanted from me, but I wasn't being authentic and real with myself about who I was. And so I haven't done a lot of dating. I have done very little dating actually since the manor, because I realized I'm not ready. I'm not fully who I want to be yet. I'm still evolving. I'm healing. Now, sure, I could probably find someone to heal with, right? But I feel like I'm at such a critical crossroads in my life that I don't want to complicate it with a relationship right now, because I do very well in my life, except when it comes to romantic relationships. It's an absolute fucking train wreck, mostly because of the people I select. I talked about my picker being broken, and it was, once I gained the understanding that what I'm trying to do is heal myself through the people I choose, then I realized, well, instead of involving a third party, why don't we do the work here first and then maybe I'll start to be attracted to what's good for me. And I have found that is evolving, because literally what I find attractive and appealing has done a 180, which is really interesting, because I used to be part of the construction crew. I wanted to save somebody. I wanted to help somebody.
Yeah.
I saw potential and I wanted to help them realize their potential. Really, I wanted to heal myself, but I just didn't have the guts to admit that or understand that. So I've tried to do it with the men in my life. And now I've realized, that's not my job. I'm not part of a construction crew. You're your own construction crew. Like, you need to work on yourself. I'll work on myself, and we'll both show up as fully developed human beings. Right. But the intimacy part, it's a challenge, because you end up getting hurt, and the potential for being hurt exists. And a lot of times that's been enough of a deterrent to keep me away from it, because I just don't know how much more hurt I can take. Like, is there a threshold where after you're hurt so much that eventually you just go crazy? Like, I don't want to push that envelope. I don't want to test that theory of how much is enough. But I'm also, I think, as I'm going through this process with myself, I'm becoming so much more strong and more aware and even more resilient than I have been. So I think I will get to a point where I can say, you know what, worst case scenario, because I'm really big on doing that, preparing for the worst case scenario. I get hurt. Well, guess what? I land on my feet. It's okay. Like, it's okay to be hurt. It's not obviously something you seek out, but you still have to know in the back of your mind, I'm going to be okay. It's that whole analogy of a bird sitting on a branch. It doesn't worry about the branch breaking because it knows it can just fly off. And so I need to know that I'm okay sitting on that branch. And if it does break, I'll land on my feet and I'll be okay. But yeah, the intimacy thing, it's very layered and convoluted, but that's more or less what it means to me and how it's been showing up in my life here lately.
So how does it feel when you see, and maybe you don't see, but you can't really, when you see stories or rumors about you and some high profile celebrities and they're dating and this is happening, that's happened. How do you feel when you see those things? Can you laugh about them, or do you think, what is the story from? What the hell is that all about? And
well, I'll be honest, on some level, it's an ego trip, because I'm just delighted that someone's talking about me and I'm being seen.
Yeah.
Because I spent so much of my life being invisible, that it's I find it a bit flattering, really. And a bit validating. I'll be honest, like, on some level. And then on another level, it's, and the more you read down, the more I realize, well, no, they didn't get that right. Well, that's not true. And then I start realizing, well, these untruths could become truth to people because they're reading it and they're thinking that it's true.
Yeah.
So I had to resist that temptation to feel like I needed to refute everything and just let it be and just let people think what they want to think. I know the truth. He knows the truth. It is what it is. And anybody talking about it's not going to change that. I mean, I wish I could share some of the funny stuff and some of the, exciting things, but I'm learning that sometimes the less said, the better, because people are going to think what they want to think anyway, regardless of what you say, and they'll take whatever you say and twist it. So I'm learning to just be okay with it. I'm learning to just let people think what they want to think and find comfort in knowing the truth.
I think that's definitely the best way to be. And I think there's still that human notion where we don't think a man and a woman can be friends, close, have fun together without being in a relationship. It's so weird, and I've always been very fortunate. I think that all of my friends have always been women, and they just were interesting to talk to, nice to look at. But then a lot, and I've loved lots of different women. Not in a way I love my wife or my previous partners, but I really love this person, but not in a, oh, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we ended up in bed together? Doesn't. It either happens when you first meet somebody or immediately, right, you're in a friendship zone, which is great. As long as you both know it, it's fine. But there's still that human thing about, men and women, they can't be friends, can they? That can't work. That's just so weird, really. And I think there's still a degree of what the right words are: shame, taboo, guilt, when we talk about sex or sexuality and the different kinks that we all have. We all have them. But you seem to be quite comfortable now talking about those things. And here's a couple of questions. So first of all, I guess two things we don't talk about: money and sex. That is two things.
Right.
Both of them are pretty important in different ways. Why do you think we don't talk about sex? Often even with our partners. We end up with a partner, you might be together a month, 6 months, 6 years, 50 years, but you just don't actually talk about what you like, don't like, might want to try, and don't ever want to do again. Why do you think there's that fear of talking about it?
Yeah, I don't know, but like, I can't speak for everyone else, but I can surmise a few things. I think there's just a lot of shame around it. There's a lot of embarrassment around it because we don't have a really good understanding of it, because we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And you think you're the only one, and you feel isolated and you feel, like, oh my God, I'm weird. No, you're not weird. You're normal because you're feeling weird. You know what I mean? And especially in American society, it's, the whole don't be a whore, don't be a slut, your sexuality. And they tie the things into women being comfortable with their sexuality as being loose.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, people. Do you not understand this is just some way to harness our sexuality? Because God forbid if we did use it to its fullest potential, women would run the world. So I think it is in many ways a patriarchal thing to shame women specifically into not talking about sex, not being comfortable with sex, covering their bodies, being shameful, because it's a way to harness that power and keep it from, evolving into something that men can't control. And, it was funny, like anytime someone's called me a whore or a slut, I'm like, really? Like, okay, do I need to put that on my resume under achievement? Is there a whore registry somewhere I need to sign up for? Like, so what? Like, what? The only reason you're telling me that is you're trying to shame me. You're trying to make me feel bad about something that I shouldn't feel bad about, because it's just your perception. And it may not be based in reality, or it may. I don't know, nor do I care. So it's always funny when people try to use those terms to shame us. But I think that's why we don't talk about it, because we're fearful of judgment. We're fearful of what people might think about us or our families or our children. And there's great power and great confidence that has come from this point or this evolution in my life, where I went from being very shameful about sex and not understanding my body and not enjoying sex to realizing, holy shit, this is amazing. This is what this can do. It's like having a Ferrari and not understanding what all the gears did. It took me some time to get comfortable with it. And I'm not totally there yet. There are certain things that I get kind of bashful and embarrassed about, but owning that part of you and realizing that it's not something to be embarrassed about or shameful of is such a giant leap forward in understanding and accepting of yourself, because sex is a big part of us. I mean, it's the reason we exist in the first place. Without it, none of us would be here. But why we won't talk about it and why we won't communicate about it is something that's puzzling, and I find it really unfortunate. I mean, it's a societal thing, right? And I think over time it's improving, it's getting better. But still there's so many stereotypes and so many pitfalls for women that it's just not, comfortable for us yet. But I'm laying out so much of my life and who I am. That just seems like a logical part to include. Like you said, everybody's got kinks, and if you don't think you have one, it's because you haven't found it yet. I mean, we all have them and to varying degrees, right? I've said this before. It's like on a spectrum. I mean, some people are really out there because That's just very different than what you've ever been exposed to. And there are some more mainstream kind of things. But yeah, I mean, for the longest time, I was in pursuit of my kink. I tried lots of different things just because you don't know if you like it until you try it.
Well, you don't.
Right? I mean, there's some things I wouldn't recommend trying, but it's obviously, I think, a very healthy and normal manifestation of who we are to explore with our sexuality. And and then the whole thing about being bisexual or homosexual and all the societal bullshit that goes into that, that's yet another reason for us not to talk about it, to be shameful of it. And, I'm not embarrassed to say it. There was a point in time after my divorce where I dated this very nice woman, and I came out to my family as gay. I was like, I'm a lesbian. I was owning it. And of course my sisters were like, Lannette, you're not gay. Like, come on. I was like, no, I really am. No, I wasn't gay. I was exploring. I was trying to understand my fascination and my attraction to other women. And, after several months, it became very evident that I was heterosexual. And it was really unfortunate because she was a lovely lady and, we would have made a great partnership. But I don't know why we don't do more of that to try to understand really what we're after and who we are. But yeah, it was an interesting time, to say the least.
I think you're right. A lot of it comes down to societal or religious barriers or constraints. And I think a bit like the kink thing, I think everybody is on this spectrum between 0 and 100, straight to gay or whatever. Because as a man, I can say, wow, God, that guy's gorgeous. Does that mean I'm partly gay? Maybe. Does it mean I want to sleep with him? No. But I can appreciate male beauty, and I can, and it's a very funny thing, really. And I think both of us are parents of boys and girls, and I think what helps the next generation, hopefully, is that me, lots of people are more willing to talk about it with their children. My parents didn't talk about it with me. I think my dad just sort of said, which is good. If a girl ever says no, just stop. That was pretty much all he ever said. And the school sex education was not, well, it wasn't even that. It was how to put a condom on a banana. Which could be very confusing if you weren't sure what they were doing. Do we have to use a banana? No, you have to use a banana. But it's, and my kids now, they say it hasn't changed very much since then. My goodness, it's that whole thing around. And I think what a lot of people perhaps fear is that they have this kink that nobody else has ever thought of. Exactly. If you're listening to this, believe me, somebody else out there has that kink. Believe me, no matter how weird you might think it is, it really isn't. And I've been lucky enough to talk to a handful of sort of sex workers and dominatrix and different people, and they often say for the men that they deal with in particular, a lot of the things that the men come to them for, yes, it might be the intimacy, but a lot of it is the conversation. As I spoke to this wonderful dominatrix in Poland, Romania rather. She's very young. She must be 25 or something. And she was saying it tends to be people coming to me and asking for things that they're very nervous what their partner would say. So as the man, I'm not supposed to want things to be submissive sometimes. I'm meant to be dominant all the time. So this almost fear of the fear of saying to the partner, just maybe this weekend, could I be submissive to you? Could you tie me up? Could you, whatever the thing are? My God, I can never say that to my wife, but you're going to pay this complete stranger and explain it to her. And it's very odd that I think it's the fear of the fear. I go back to when I was sort of 13 years old, wanting to ask a girl out to the cinema or whatever. Oh my God, just the crippling fear of, like you said, the worst case scenario. She's going to tell everybody. I'll have to leave school. I'll have to leave home. I'll have to be a monk. I'll have to go and I can't. Oh my God, literally just ask and just say yes or no, and that's it. But we don't give ourselves that permission in a way. And I think a bit like you sort of saying, sort of realize that, wow, sex can be, wow. And I think I talked to a somatic therapist a while ago, and she was saying one of the things that we don't do as teenagers when we first come into puberty and we start perhaps exploring our own bodies, we don't really explore our own bodies. I think it's something like 54% of women have never looked at their vulva in a mirror, which is extraordinary. But for guys, it's there. We see it.
Right.
We're pretty much obsessed with it. That's what it is, really. But women, I think there's this, oh my God, am my labia too big? I watch porn and they're very neat and everybody's completely shaved. And mine doesn't look like that. It's just this terrible view that somehow they're different. But every single woman, man in the world is different. And there's somebody out there for all of us. It's a weird thing that we don't spend the time to spend an hour or two when we're younger exploring our bodies and what feels nice and what doesn't feel nice. If we masturbate, we do it to get off very quickly. We don't want somebody to knock on the door or burst in or whatever, or hear us. And yeah, we do it almost in this surreptitious, hidden, secretive,
shameful.
It's shameful way, which it doesn't take a genius psychologist to think, well, I wonder what that's going to cause in the future.
Right.
And it's hard. It must be hard to be a teenager then, and it is now, because the expectations of what people see or read about or hear or believe are so rife, and you don't know what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing.
Exactly. I mean, obviously there's components to that are, private, right?
Absolutely.
I wouldn't recommend, getting on the internet and doing it, but
no.
But again, it's that shameful, let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
It's forbidden, it's embarrassing, it's inappropriate. And and it's funny when people are like surprised and like, oh my God, you're talking about all these things in front of these people. And I'm like, no, it's more embarrassing that you take issue with it.
Yeah.
That's more embarrassing to me. That's, you're kind of showing yourself when you say things like that. Mental health, we all have mental health. We all have challenges. We all suffer on some level. And it's like, I'm tired of suffering in silence. And, and it's funny because that's the next question I get, the most often question I get is, how did you end up on a reality show? And then the second most often question I get is, how are you able to talk about these things? And I'm like, I turn it back around and go, well, why don't you talk about them?
Yeah.
Because the reason I'm talking about them is the converse of why you don't. I mean, I'm tired of suffering in silence, and I don't want other people to suffer in silence. And that is, I don't have any gifts. I don't play the piano. I don't sing. I can't dance, but I can talk, and I can be real, and I can be sincere. And I have a knack for taking really complicated things and making them simple. And so I'm like, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be talking about these things and removing some stigma and potentially helping people, if by any other way than just reaching them and validating how they feel, because that goes a long way in helping heal people from hurts they've experienced. And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, I've been hurt in a lot of ways. And so maybe that is why I've been hurt the way I've been hurt. So I can speak about it, so I can share it, so I can potentially help somebody else deal with their hurt. It kind of helps me make sense of my suffering, because it's really depressing when you think you just suffer for the sake of suffering. Like it makes me feel better about myself and my suffering to know there's a purpose to it. There's a reason behind it, that I'm supposed to do something with it. And it's like me giving it meaning beyond the scope of just the hurt. It's kind of me taking my power back from it now that I think about it. It's like I'm not a victim. I'm just a woman who's experienced a lot of really sad things in her life. But that's not all of who I am. But it is what's motivating me to speak and to have the opportunity to share.
And I think you're in exactly the right place now. We certainly don't need more singers. We need more people that can talk. Are you comfortable? And if you're not, just say, are you comfortable touching a little bit on your experiences with addiction?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
First of all, congratulations for being sort of clean for so long. And I just wonder if you could just maybe talk a little bit as to why you think addiction is part of your life and your personality, and how did you find the strength to make the decision to become clean, I guess, almost rather than being clean? But what was it that made you decide, no, I'm going to do it this time?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what made me susceptible to it, this is kind of my perception of addiction after experiencing it. And, I'll be in recovery the rest of my life. And just so we're clear here, my drug of choice was cocaine, the stimulant. For me, addiction was symptomatic of something bigger. The problem isn't the substance you choose to abuse. The problem is why you sought it out in the first place. And I was full of pain. I growing up, always felt different. I felt like an alien. I never felt like I belonged on this planet. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things, right? And I know it's because of my childhood trauma, but I felt like an alien. I didn't feel like I belonged. And there was a level of discomfort in my skin that when I use the word discomfort, that does not fully encapsulate the discomfort. And I'd always felt that way. I just felt like I didn't belong here, that I was born at the wrong time in the wrong body. That's how I felt. And so when I stumbled upon, and I tried all different kinds of things. I mean, I was smoking weed and drinking by the time I was 14, and to excess, any chance I got. I was just fortunate that it didn't affect like my schooling, or I didn't get arrested. I didn't get in trouble. I was smart enough to, keep my nose clean enough, if you will, not to get caught. But I was in college when I first found cocaine, and it was a love affair at first sight, because it immediately took that discomfort and those pains away. I felt in control. I was invigorated. It gives you energy. It makes you feel invincible. And to a little girl that had never felt seen, heard, or worthy of anything, to feel that way was absolutely amazing. And I mean, from the first time I did it, it was great, because one of the things, and I'm not trying to promote the use of cocaine, but one of the things that really appealed to me was the fact that I could do it and feel so good and not appear very fucked up. Because when I drank a lot, everybody knew I was drinking. Everybody knew I was drunk. But when you're on cocaine, there's a level of passing you can do that you don't reek of abuse, right? I mean, there's ways to get away with it. So that was something else. But when I was in my early 20s, I got pregnant with my son right as I was graduating from college. And so that brought to a screeching halt all of that party behavior. I had just gotten my first real job, my first corporate job. And so I had health insurance and dental coverage and, all the good stuff. Right. And so I really pivoted from being, the party girl at Carolina to the professional mom. And that was a transition I made during my pregnancy. And so, I didn't touch or see the stuff again for 25, 30 years. And I didn't even think about it, to be honest with you, during those years. And then about 5 years ago, I was casually seeing a guy who invited me to a pool party around the corner from my house. He said, "Come by, there'll be powder there." And I remember thinking, "Oh, wow, my old friend. Wow, it's nice to see her again." And then, as you like to say, the rest is history. But, because there's no casual use of cocaine. And if you think you're a casual user of cocaine, I'll sadly inform you that no, you're an addict. You just haven't come to terms with it yet. Because as soon as you do it, it's in control. And so inevitably, the more you do, the more tolerance you build up, the less of the feeling you get, the more you pursue it, the more you do, then the more dangerous it becomes. And, I'm pretty much an overachiever in every aspect of my life. So I was going to overachieve in the addiction category too. So I was doing, inordinate amounts of cocaine. And it really came down to one morning it was about a 5-day bender. I had probably slept a cumulative 5 or 6 hours in those 5 days and probably hadn't eaten in several days. And I had taken my daughter to school, meeting my obligations as a mom, as I hoped and liked to think that I did. And I was driving back home, and I saw what I thought was a homeless person in my neighborhood on the side of the road. And, I thought, oh God, that's sad. And then I was like, God, I haven't seen a lot of homeless people around here. That's kind of unusual. And I looked again, and it was a street sign. And I realized my biggest fear was coming to fruition. My biggest fear is being crazy and not knowing it. So I knew I was on the verge of a psychosis. And that scared the shit out of me, because that to me was a point of no return. And so I came home, looked at myself in the mirror and said, get real with yourself, Lannette. If you want to kill yourself, there's a cheaper, easier way to do it. Don't draw it out. And I immediately was hit with the thought of, I don't want to die, and I need to be here for my kids. They don't deserve that. And so I was like, well, I've got to get help. And I had been toying with the idea for about a year that I'd had a problem, because I would be cutting up 8 balls going, guys, y'all think I have a problem here? Should I stop? If you're asking other people doing cocaine if you have a problem, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So I knew it. I just wasn't ready to do something about it yet. And that morning, realizing that I was going crazy was the impetus for me to get help and know that I can't afford to do this. I can't do this to my kids. I can't do this to my family. I can't do this to my job. I can't do this to myself anymore. And so I just started Googling rehab facilities, and I got on the phone with this wonderful doctor at Triangle Wellness and Recovery here in Cary. And we had like an hour and a half Zoom and started peeling back all the layers. And she got me into what we called a modified outpatient program, because I was absolutely not going inpatient.
Yeah.
No, too disruptive. I can't do that. I eventually did, but at that time I just wasn't there. So, and so that started me on the path of recovery. And, I relapsed several times, and, and her words would echo in my ears about, relapse is part of recovery. Quit beating yourself up. Quit giving up. You fall off, you get back up, you get back on, and you continue forward. And so that was something that always stayed with me. And then, I did a 30-day rehab down in Florida. I'm very fortunate that I've got great health insurance and could afford something like that. And we affectionately called it trauma camp, because we didn't talk about addiction at all. That was like secondary. I mean, it was almost like in the off time, we would talk about, well, what do you do? Are you an alcoholic? Are you into heroin? What's your thing? Because we never talked about the addiction. What we talked about was our trauma. We talked about why we needed something to escape from. What were we trying to numb? What were we trying to stop the feelings of? And so we started unpacking all that childhood trauma, and it was absolutely the most transformative time of my life. And people think I'm weird when I say this, but I am so grateful that I went through this addiction, that I went through this recovery, because it opened up parts of me that had been sealed shut. And it provided such an understanding and a level of compassion and love for myself that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I mean, I am forever grateful. I mean, my lowest point in my life was leaving that recovery center. I insisted on driving myself there and back, because I figured I got myself into this. I need to get myself out. And I was driving through the gate. So my car sat there the whole month I was there, and I would look at it. And I got in the car that day to leave. I finished my 30 days, and I remember the gates closing behind me, and I just fucking lost it. Just cried like a baby. Just sat in my car and cried, because I knew that was the lowest point in my life. But what's great about the lowest point? Everything else is up.
Yeah.
So I still have a lot of gratitude. I really do. I'll be 1,000 days clean on July 18th. And I'm forever vigilant, right? I'm not going to get arrogant in my recovery and think, oh, I've got this licked, I'm in control. No, I will be forever sensitive and aware. But I also know that just cocaine is not part of my story anymore. It's not who I am. Yeah. It's what I did. It's medicine I chose to use. It was a poor choice to use that kind of medicine, but I understand why I did it. Mm-hmm. And I understand now why I don't. And I don't need it anymore. I really don't. And it doesn't hold the appeal that it once did for me, which again, you address the underlying hurt, shame, and vulnerabilities, and then the addiction, the symptoms of it just go away. It's no longer an issue. That's kind of the way I look at it, and the way I've dealt with it.
Yeah, I've been sober for 14 years now.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. But
Very nice.
It's like you say though, it was never about the alcohol. It could have been anything really. But it's just when you allow yourself to explore a little bit more deeply and figure out, well, what is it that's masking, or what is that bringing to the fore, or what is that doing? And then you think, okay, once I figured that out, then the actual thing itself doesn't matter really. And the same as you, it is just a case of being hyper vigilant. And there's always that thing, wow, because that one good night. I must be like, most addicts should have that tattooed on their arm. It's like, oh, I can just have one good night. No, because that would just bring back all of those things that you've been trying to work through, etc. So what does pleasure look like to you today? So not a sort of stimulant driven pleasure. What does pleasure look like and feel for you today?
It's a quiet confidence, it's peace, it's tranquility. I used to associate those things with boredom, and now I realize being bored is a gift. It's a privilege. And because I've always been one of those go, 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 go. I mean, I was always outrunning whatever it was that was packed up in those boxes in the back of my mind. And so now I have, quiet moments of contemplation and deliberation. And having that has been such a gift and such an amazing thing for me, because it's transformed who I am, and it's made a huge difference just in my personality and in every aspect of my life. So I guess for me it's just the love and peace and tranquility of life. Do I still like the drama of life? Oh, for sure. Do I still like to stir shit up? Oh, for sure. But I still know that I can come back to this quiet place of peace and calm, and that to me is what it's all about.
Are you a meditator? Are you an outdoors person? Are you an exercise junkie? How do you nourish yourself?
Well, it's funny you say that. I just got back into tennis. Tennis was a love of mine from the time I was like 8 or 9 years old on. And I took a 6-year hiatus from it. I played competitively in the USTA leagues and whatnot all through my 30s and much of my 40s. And I started taking tennis lessons with my daughter again. So we bought new rackets. We got, the visors. We got all the accoutrements. And I'm getting really excited about it. And getting out there and hitting that little yellow ball is, wow, that's great therapy. I mean, any movement of your body is great therapy. But being able to hit the hell out of the ball and hear that thump when you know you've hit a great shot, that, to me, that's my thing. That's where I find joy. For sure.
And tennis clothes are kind of sexy as well.
Yeah. Oh, the skirts are cute, right?
Yeah. When do you feel you're sexiest? When do you feel that you're hot, you're sexy? When do you feel like that?
Okay, so I'll be completely honest. The first thought that popped into my mind was when I get out of the shower and I'm putting on lotion, because I bathe in this lotion I get from Sam's Club. It's very cheap, but it's amazing. And I bathe in it from head to toe. And honestly, that is when I feel the most sensual, when I'm the most literally in touch with my body. I do, because I'm like looking, and you're soft, and you're all slimy and sparkly, and that is probably when I feel the sexiest, because I'm feeling the most in touch with myself, literally and figuratively.
And what are you dreaming into right now? What does your personal and professional future feel like it's going to manifest? How do you feel the future's going to unravel?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I have a great career and I work for an amazing company. And I had a rock star day 2 days ago. I got my annual review and it was extraordinary.
Awesome.
Thank you. And it was really hard to hear all the positive things about myself, because it still doesn't hit quite right yet. But having that in mind, that will be my career, and I'm sure I'll do it till I die. But sort of as a side gig, which if it could turn into a main gig would be absolutely tremendous, is just this notion of public speaking and sharing and talking to different groups, different audiences. I mean, I'm writing a book. I mean, who isn't?
No, that was going to be my next, well, not even a question. It was going to be a statement. It was going to be, well, you have to be writing a book, surely.
Exactly.
Nobody with this, not even story, this, it just feels like a journey, but journey is such an overused word, but it just really feel like a sort of deep exploration that you've undergone. I think it would be really valuable for people to be able to read that and realize that, yeah, maybe I can do something about this. Look at what Lannette did. She did it, and even if I can do a bit of that, then that's going to be a huge achievement. So, yeah, keep writing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I like to tell people, it's like, I'm no one special. Like I'm this country girl born in the Appalachian Mountains in the 70s, like, you know, that had just adverse situations to overcome. I'm not particularly strong or resourceful or gifted. You know, I just had this will to continue. And that's what we all have. We all have that in us. You don't have to be special. I mean, you are special just by virtue of you being here. And like you said, being able to share that and impress upon people that there's no like magic fairy dust that makes all this stuff happen. It's like you are the fairy dust. Like you've already hit the holy grail because you're here. And you know, let's choose to make the most of it while we are and make it the best we can possibly make it, regardless of what happens to us, because we're so much more than what has happened to us. And, you know, and I don't have that victim mentality. If anything, I just see it as another chapter in the book. You know, I'm like, oh, okay, well, here's one more thing we can document and move on. You know, and if other people would find that inspiring, that would make all of it meaningful for me, for sure.
You've been super generous with your time. So I have one more question, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
So if someone listening or watches, if they're feeling unseen or untouched or disconnected, what would you say to them over a coffee or a glass of wine, or even just a whisper into their ear?
Well, it's something I reflect on frequently. It's just this notion that this too shall pass. I know what the isolation feels like, though. That's tough. But knowing that you're not alone and that you're not going to always feel this way is important. You have to. It's critical to maintain that perspective even when you've lost it. And I've often thought of getting that tattooed on my forearm, because there are times I forget that too. You get so immersed in whatever situation you're currently in that you completely lose sight of everything else. And just remembering that this too shall pass. You're not always going to feel this way. And knowing too that you are not alone. You are not alone. And I've been one of those people standing in a room full of people and felt alone. So I get that. I understand that. And knowing that there are certain people in your life that are going to get it, and there are certain people that aren't. And you just you got to find your people, the people that get it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your candor and openness, your vulnerability. And I know you said before that you're nothing special, but I would absolutely refute that you are somebody very special. And I think you have a voice, you're using it, I think you're very good at what you do. So yeah, the more opportunity you get to sort of speak and talk and share, it's inspiring. That's what people want, a bit of inspiration in their life. So thank you so much.
Thank you.